Before we begin the story of why this cat watched the sunset every day, the heartbreaking legend of Maribelle, I invite you to get comfortable. Let the world fade for a while. If you find yourself drawn into these quiet tales, feel free to like and subscribe. It helps more stories find their way to the firelight. Now, let's begin. They say you could set your clock by her. Same time, same place, every single day. A hilltop just beyond the last row of cottages, where wild grasses bowed low against the breeze, that was her place. And when the sky turned lavender, she would appear. A small figure, still as stone, shaped in whispers of fur and silence, always facing west. No one ever saw where she came from. She would not beg, not chase, not meow. Just sit, perfectly still. Eyes wide and golden, fixed on the horizon as if watching for something only she could see. Some said it was nothing, just a cat. They do odd things, but even they didn't say it with much conviction. Because here's the thing, she never missed a day. Not when the winds tore through the hedgerows. Not when summer bears its weight across the skin of the meadows. Not even in winter, when frost iced the hill like sugar on a quiet cake. Children brought her bits of fish, soft with vinegar. She never touched them. One boy swore he saw her move, once. Just once, to adjust herself by inches. Closer to the sun. They say the sun sets later in summer, but no matter. She knew the moment, the exact moment, it began. Her paws would be set, her ears angled just so, before the first fold of gold brushed across the hills. Old Mrs. Harvin once whispered, "She's waiting for someone. Or something." And people believed her, in the way one believes in ghosts that knock gently and disappear before you wake. Stray cats come and go in these parts. But not this one. She had a name, though nobody dared use it at first. They weren't given it, they felt it. Somehow, gently placed on the tongue like a snowflake. Maribelle. It felt too soft, too quiet to question. Maribelle watched the sunset. Every single day. And no one knew why. But some said, if you stood very still beside her, and listened as the wind pulled through the grass, you could almost hear her thinking. It began during rain. The kind that taps softly on barn roofs and smells like earth turned awake. In a corner of hay and hush, a litter of kittens arrived, 5 hearts blinking into the world. Squirming, rooting, mewling. All bold, all strong. Except for the tiniest one. She was smaller than her breath. More silence than fur. Her cry didn't reach over the thunder. Her siblings wriggled past her easily, noses clumsily seeking warmth. Some said she wouldn't last the night. But someone else thought otherwise. Her name was Clara. Retired from teaching, Clara spent her days in peaceful routine, slow hands tending roses, teacups steaming on the porch, and afternoon sonatas floating from an old record player. She often walked the pastures after storms, basket in hand, gathering windfallen apples or just watching clouds finish whatever stories they'd begun. That's how she found the kitten. Cold, trembling, half buried in straw, barely moving. Clara didn't hesitate. The kitten was scooped quietly into a shawl, against a heart that had taught generations to read and now, perhaps, would teach something else entirely. She named her Maribelle, not after anyone, just because. Clara said the name arrived like a memory she hadn't lived yet. And from then on, they were never far apart. There was something about their rhythm. Clara's voice, warm with syllables aged like tea. Books read aloud, not to be finished, but simply to be shared. Days shaped by full teacups and half-finished crosswords. Maribelle became part of the furniture, and more than that, part of the atmosphere. A softness at the edge of every moment. Clara didn't speak to Maribelle like one chats to a pet. She spoke to her the way people talk to old houses, kindly, habitually, as though the silence between words meant something too. The tabby never meowed, not in the usual ways. She answered with ear twitches, tail flicks, blinking slow agreement, and once, Clara swore, a soundless purr that could only be felt in the fingertips. Days passed, like petals falling from a book's pressed pages. And each day began the same, breakfast by the ivy-climbed window, radio humming, Clara reading aloud the newspapers she never quite trusted. Maribelle, watching birds but never chasing them. No need. Evenings, Clara would tend her garden with ancient grace. Roses that bent only for her. Maribelle followed in slow steps, tail upright like a small flag of loyalty. Other cats might wander. She never did. Some say cats only stay where they're fed. But Maribelle was full even when the bowl was empty. It wasn't long before Clara added another step to their days. Something quiet, a small habit, as simple as breath. Sitting down in the old wingback chair by the western window each evening. Watching the light change, not glancing, watching, eyes never hurried, words unspoken, just the two of them, framed by florals and filtered gold. The sun slinking past hedges and over rooftops, and the sky, always changing, yet familiar. "Thank you," Clara would sometimes whisper to the horizon. The first time she said it, Maribelle blinked. Slow, soft, as if they'd practiced it already. It became their ritual. Each evening, Clara's hand wrapped in the cat's fur. Each evening, they sat. No matter the season, no matter the weather, no matter the aches that began to creep into Clara's bones like shy vines. The window pane grew dim with dusk. But their eyes held the light just a little longer. Neighbors passing by came to expect it. Two still figures in lavender light, one smiling faintly, the other as still as breath before sleep. Maribelle never missed it. Clara would chuckle. "You've got a clock inside you, haven't you?" And the cat would flick an ear, not quite in answer, but certainly in knowing. There are some bonds words can't quite reach. Built not from acts of grandeur, but from the softness of being chosen again, and again, without question. So, not just a cat, and certainly not just a pet. She was Clara's heart that walked. And waited, and always came back. It started with a chair. An old thing, padded thin with age, floral once but faded now into the colors of dust and tea leaves. Clara placed it near the western window, where the light slanted like pages turning. She said it was the best seat in the world, not for comfort, but for company. The sun, she said, had stories to tell. Every evening, as the light shifted from gold to rose, Clara would settle into that chair, a worn shawl over her knees, steaming cup within reach. At first, she simply watched the sky. Then, she began to talk to it. Not with expectation, more like greeting a familiar passerby. A smile, a wave, and sometimes, a few words too soft for anyone else to hear. "I used to think sunset meant a day was gone," she once whispered, "but now I think it means I lived it." Maribelle didn't join her right away. Cats are like that. They watch before they follow. But soon, Clara began to notice the quiet paws padding into the room each evening. Not randomly, not wandering, Maribelle came with purpose. Without a sound, she would leap onto the windowsill and sit, not dozing, not distracted, but looking. Like her, always west. It became their hour. Neighbors on passing walks would look up and smile. The golden rectangles of Clara's window, two shadows framed in silence. Slowly, word spread in the quiet village. If you passed near dusk, you could catch them, woman and cat, bathed in evening's final warmth. Clara called it her daily thank you. Sometimes, she told Maribelle what she was grateful for. The roses that survived the frost. The letter from an old student. The way bread sometimes rose just right on the first try. Maribelle never replied, but she always listened. The sun never waited, but it always returned. With it, their ritual deepened. It wasn't about the streaks of pink or amber anymore. It was about what lived between them. Some claimed animals don't tell time. But Maribelle knew the moment light began to change. Even before Clara moved toward her chair, the tabby was padding to her place. She never arrived late, not once, as though something in her fur was tuned to the angle of light, the turning of skies. And there, they would sit. Immobile, intent, Clara's hand resting in the tabby's fur, their silence shaped like prayer. Sometimes Clara whispered nothing at all. Because some hearts know when not to speak. Other times, she told stories, not new ones, not important ones. Just fragments of growing up, or nonsense rhymes from her teaching days, or the names of stars she half remembered. Maribelle responded only as cats do. A shifting ear, a closing eye, a shoulder leaned into a palm. But somehow, it always felt like a conversation. As the seasons turned, so did the sky. Summer's glare softened into copper autumn. Winter came sharp, with evenings arriving early, but still, the chair was moved near the window. Still, the teacup steamed. Still, Maribelle came. Visitors noticed. Nurses, delivery men, visiting nieces, all remarked on it. "She's always there," they'd say. Some photographed it. Most simply watched. And in watching, grew still themselves. Clara began writing small notes some evenings, folded into drawers, slipped between pages of old notebooks. She called them sunset moments. Maribelle never touched the papers. But once, Clara laughed to find one nudged open by a paw. The one that read, "Sometimes I think the cat's not watching the sun. She's watching me." And perhaps she was. Because after all, Clara didn't always face the window either. Sometimes her eyes stayed closed. Some evenings her hands trembled, and her tea cooled untouched. But Maribelle remained. Always there. Always west. And always, just before the sky changed, she arrived. The leaves began to fall before the cold did. First in ones and twos, orange and brittle, catching gently on Clara's rosebushes and collecting along the garden path. The sun lowered faster now. Dinners happened sooner. Shadows lingered longer in the corners of rooms. Clara's steps became shorter. The steadiness that once moved her through the house like a quiet song now faltered in unexpected places. At thresholds, under door frames, and in the garden, where the rake felt heavier than she remembered. Still, every evening, she rose at the same time. She would pause by the side table, fingers grazing the rim of her teacup, and glance toward the window. No words, just that look. A promise kept once again. And just before she moved, Maribelle would already be waiting. By then it was more than habit. It was their vow, gently renewed, wordless and whole. The tabby never needed calling. She understood the shift in the air, the hush in the floorboards, the quiet creak of aging bones bearing weight one more time for something important. Clara's shawl changed with the weather. In October, it was wool. By November, velvet-lined. She smiled at herself in the mirror only briefly now, as if checking not appearance but presence. "I made it," she'd murmur once, rubbing Maribelle's head with fingers that remembered chalk dust and piano keys. One more day. The garden began to thin, roses curling inward like sleeping fists. Clara could no longer kneel to tend them, so Maribelle did. Nestling through the stems each afternoon, brushing fallen petals into soft piles. Neighbors passed slower now. Sometimes they'd wave. Sometimes they'd simply nod and keep walking. Inside, the radio stayed lower. The tea brewed longer. Clara's hands favored mugs with both palms, and her books remained more often closed, as if the stories inside them had learned to wait. And yet the window remained their altar. Each evening, Clara lifted herself from the chair at least once, only to sit again, this time with Maribelle closer, curled not just beside her, but beneath her hand. Her fingers didn't stroke anymore. They rested, the kind of touch that held more memory than motion. There were days the chair remained empty until nearly dark, and people passing feared the worst. But then, just as the last blush painted the side of the hill, there she would be. Eyes soft, voice gone quieter than before. Maribelle curled tight at her feet. Sometimes, Clara seemed to nod off. Not asleep exactly, but adrift, perhaps, somewhere between day and the dimming sky. And always, without fail, Maribelle would stay alert. Watching, even when the sun dipped quickly, even when the drafts slithered in from the edges of the window frame, even when Clara's shawl slipped to the floor and wasn't retrieved, Maribelle remained. One evening, a village boy walking his dog glanced toward the house and saw only the cat, upright at the windowsill. Not kneading, not blinking, he told his mother, "I think the cat watches the sky for the both of them now." Inside, Clara's breathing had taken on a rhythm that didn't always match the ticking clock. But Maribelle never missed a beat. She adjusted herself when needed, leaned in a little closer as the days shortened, as Clara's silences deepened. Outside, frost began webbing across fence posts. Firewood was stacked lower. Smoke curled from the neighbors' chimneys, but Clara's house remained dark until the sunset cracked it open in gold. And each time it did, the sky bathed both of them. Two silhouettes merged by shadow and light. A woman who once taught children to find their place on the page. And a cat who taught her how to wait. Even as her hands stilled. Even as each movement asked more. Clara never stopped coming to the window. But now, Maribelle was first. Always first. The frost had arrived that morning, soft and white along the fence posts, like powdered silence. A stillness settled over the village, one of those days when every sound felt wrapped in wool, and every breath lingered just a moment longer in the air. Inside the house, Clara did not brew her tea. No radio played. No footsteps marked the slow cadence of her morning. The pages of her book remained unturned. Even the roses seemed to know. Maribelle stayed near the bedroom door. She had not moved from it since before dawn, only flicking her tail now and then, as if swatting at the quiet. They say the final breath is often the softest, a sigh more than a sound. A release. A returning. Clara's came just before the sun began to set. She had not spoken that day. Not out loud. But her eyes had opened once, slowly, and found the west-facing window. Her lips curved, faintly, not in joy, not in sadness, but in remembrance. In recognition. And when she closed her eyes again, she didn't open them. The house did not weep. It honored the stillness. But later, just as violet began bleeding into the corners of the sky, some say they saw a glow in the bedroom window. Just for a moment, as if the sun reached in one final time, brushing Clara's cheek like an old friend saying goodbye. Maribelle padded to her place at the window. She didn't leap. She climbed with care, settled slowly. Her gaze fixed westward as always, unblinking, unmoved by the shifting gold and lavender that spun across the sky like thread pulled from a dream. She stayed long after the color faded. Hours passed. The village lights winked on. A dog barked once in the distance. Still, the little cat kept her vigil, eyes wide but soft. Not alert, not afraid. Just waiting, in the same way one waits for a familiar voice, even when they know it will not come. Some say the sky that night held more colors than usual, stranger shades, like apricot and violet braided together, kissed by a shimmer that no one could quite name. The stars arrived slowly. The moon, a thin smile behind moving clouds. Lamps turned off across the village, one by one. But she did not leave. At some hour between midnight and the first touch of frostlight on the grass, Maribelle finally rose. stepped down from the windowsill without a sound, and walked, tail low, through the kitchen's quiet. No one saw her go. But in the morning, footprints, tiny, soft, deliberate, could be found in the frost outside the back door, trailing up the slope behind the house and vanishing at the top of the hill. And at the windowsill she left behind, where the two of them had spent countless sunsets stirred and stilled by golden light, there lay a single white petal. But Clara had no white flowers in her garden. And no one ever found where it had come from. When a house loses its person, it doesn't vanish, not all at once. It lingers, in the scent of spiced tea steeped into the wood, in the shape the cushions remember, in the hush of afternoons that once held pages turning slowly. Clara's home remained, full of presents, but entirely empty. The curtains stayed half-parted at the western window. A shawl laid across the arm of the chair, draped as if expecting a hand to reach for it. Neighbors, gentle in their grief, came in twos and threes over the following days. They dusted, they swept. A niece from 2 towns over sorted through belongings with eyes the same color as Clara's, and twice choked back the same quiet cry. Maribelle never entered. She returned the morning after, briefly, nose to the door, one slow circle through the kitchen, a glance toward the window where sunlight still poured, but didn't step beyond the rug. By noon, she was gone again. And by the end of the week, it became clear. She wasn't coming inside. Instead, she found the hill. It rose just behind Clara's house, modest in height, but the highest point near enough to receive the sun's last glance each day. A gentle slope of knee-high grass and gold-threaded wildflowers. There, she began to appear. Same time, same stillness, same westward gaze. She would arrive just before the light softened, as if summoned not by habit but by covenant. Some evenings she came early and lingered. Others, she emerged only at the very edge of dusk, slipping silently from the brush like the hour itself, forming a silhouette on the sky's hemline. The villagers noticed. At first, they watched from farther off, hesitant, respectful. No one spoke loudly near the hill. No one approached too quickly. It felt like entering a room where someone was praying. Children began calling it Clara's Hill. They whispered it, too. Some tried to tempt Maribelle with warmth. Blankets laid on the grass, a saucer of milk balanced on a flat stone, but she paid none of it any mind. Her gaze never changed, unwavering, quietly fierce, even in the biting wind. The first hard snow came earlier than expected. The hill, once green and alive, turned pale and brittle. Icy gusts curled between the hedgerows. Still, each evening, that small figure appeared, fur tugged by wind, paws pressing soft tracks into white. She would sit, tail curled neatly over her feet, against the edge of the sky. And when it grew too dark to see her clearly, villagers returned to their stoves, their stories, and their steaming mugs, leaving candles at their windows for reasons none of them quite named. Once, she was gone for an entire day. The sun had vanished behind heavy clouds, and neighbors worried she had fallen sick, or been taken by coyote or storm. The hill was empty. The evening came and went without a trace of tabby fur. But the next morning, outside Clara's old window, someone found a handful of dried wildflowers, tied with a single thread of faded red yarn, the kind Clara once used to mark her books. There was no sign of footsteps. Only the flowers nestled gently on the sill, as if placed by something much softer than human hands. No one claimed them. No one tried to explain. And that evening, as color came again dipping across the far hills, Maribelle returned to the hilltop. She sat just as before, quiet, small, steadfast. All that had changed was the way the villagers saw her. Not a stray, not a pet, but something woven, part of the dusk itself. The first winter arrived without warning. One day the fields were merely cold, the next, the wind blew sharp enough to lift the corners of doors and tug leaves from their hiding places. Icicles gathered beneath the eaves like teeth. The river froze along its edges, and boots thudded heavier across packed snow. Every evening, no matter the warning in the sky or the howl in the hedgerows, Maribelle climbed the hill. Sometimes she moved slowly, pressing through drifts that reached her belly. Sometimes she paused beneath the windbreak tree halfway up, waiting until the gusts eased before continuing. From windows all across the village, people watched her. Lights dimmed, voices hushed. It felt private. One frigid night in early January, the temperature dropped enough to crack fence posts. The wind sang against shutters, and snow layered so hard and fast that even lantern light bent beneath it. Someone thought surely the cat wouldn't come. But just before the last edge of light bent behind the hills, she arrived. Half covered in frost, whiskers tipped with ice, she climbed deliberately, sat as always, motionless. A boy whispered to his sister, "She's made of something else." No one argued. That night, the frost deepened. Snow pressed against the homes like breath held too long. And still, she remained until the colors faded to slate and the last star bloomed in the east. But something strange happened the next evening. Maribelle came down just before dawn. Soft as ashfall, she crossed the frozen garden path and disappeared from sight. The sun rose in aching silence. Later that morning, the village baker went out to sweep his doorstep and nearly dropped his broom. There, on Clara's old windowsill, rested a bouquet. Dried wildflowers, muddied but intact, stitched together with something thin and tight as memory. Twigs, tiny vines, a bit of red string, faded as smoke. No one had been seen in the night. No animal left prints. No villager claimed the gift. The flowers sat precisely in the center of the sill, arranged, not scattered. Tucked like something remembered. Someone knocked gently on the librarian's door to ask if she'd placed them. She hadn't. Someone else suggested perhaps Clara's niece had returned, quietly. She hadn't. A child pointed out what the others missed. Some of the flowers were the same kind Clara had grown, but not all of them. One, in particular, was unfamiliar. Pale green, tiny bloom like a sigh of spring, even though nothing had blossomed through the ground in months. "Where do those grow?" the child asked. No one knew. No one ever did. The flowers withered slowly in the cold, but no one removed them. They stayed until the thaw. That night, Maribelle returned to the hill early. She sat taller than usual, her tail wrapped tightly around her front paws. The wind twisted her fur in slow ribbons, but she didn't move. And though the clouds hid the sunset that night, villagers said the clearing seemed brighter when she left it. Not with light exactly, but with something that felt like remembering. It started with a fox. Not the sneaky kind that raids chicken coops, but the quiet sort, red and graceful, with eyes that flickered like candlelight. A farmer's daughter spotted it first, poised at the edge of the hilltop just after Maribelle had taken her place. It didn't approach. It didn't run. It simply stood, watching the sky beside her, their silhouettes framed by copper clouds. The next evening, it came again. Then disappeared for a week. Then came back with two young following behind, each one pausing just short of the crest before trotting after their mother. Word spread slowly, gently, like stories passed under blankets in quiet living rooms. The hill had a visitor. And it wasn't alone. A magpie was next. Then a pair of them. Not startled, not shrill, just settled near the old maple stump and tilted their heads while the sun dipped low. Then rabbits. A badger once. A slow-hopping toad that nobody saw arrive but was certainly there on the rocks one evening, still as a carved worry stone. And still, Maribelle at the center. unmoving, unbothered. She did not greet, did not flinch. Only continued that long, timeless watching, and the creatures simply joined. They didn't come every day. But when they did, it was only at the hour of gold. As if drawn to something wordless. Something they too understood but couldn't name. Children whispered that it was a meeting. Adults, of course, said nothing. But more and more began walking nearby at dusk, choosing the long pathway home, slowing their steps as they passed the base of the hill. Many wouldn't even look directly. Just pause long enough to feel it. To breathe it in, because there was something there. Air moved differently at the top. Softer somehow, like you'd stepped into the memory of a place, rather than the place itself. Wind hushed around the ankles, grasses swayed without sound. Even the birdsong faded earlier. One old man who hadn't wept in 5 years came home after standing at the edge and said only, "I remembered something I didn't know I'd forgotten." And still, Maribelle came. In rain, in chill, in the amber rush before storms. She never looked toward the animals, not even once. But they came again and again. Quiet shapes in the grass and bramble. Witnesses, maybe, or companions, or nothing more than echoes of whatever she carried inside. She never left before the color faded. Never turned around. One evening, a deer, a young doe with shaky legs and wide ears, stepped to the center of the hill. She came alongside Maribelle in the last breath of daylight. The two stood there, silent and still, not touching, not turned toward each other. When the final sliver of sun slipped beneath the hills, the deer exhaled a breath so soft it looked like steam, then lowered her head. Maribelle blinked once, twice, then stood and stepped down from her place. The deer followed. Neither was seen again until the next evening. Someone said it looked like they left together. Another said, no, they just knew how to move quietly. No one could decide which was truer. But after that day, people began walking the hilltop more often, not interfering, not lingering long, just passing through. The fox didn't mind, nor the rabbits, nor the wind, and to all of them, Maribelle said nothing. Still as ever, watching west, waiting, and whatever gathered beside her. Knew to stay silent too. Leo didn't believe in stories. Not really. Not the whispered ones about cats who kept time or foxes who watched the skies. He was 13, clever in the way clever boys often are, full of questions sharp as stones and laughter that reached just beyond wanting to understand. Still, the hill made him curious. He'd watched from the fence behind the old granary, where the wood leaned and the shadows liked to gather. Every evening, the same, just before sunset, the cat would appear. Sit, stare, not move for anything. It's just an old cat, he told his friends. They've got everyone spooked. None of them argued, though none would come with him either. So he started watching from closer. Notebook in hand. Despite himself, he took notes, sunset times, cloud shapes, temperature, phases of the moon. Sometimes, he even timed how long she sat. He told himself it was all to prove a point. But time did something strange near the hill. It didn't behave. One evening, his watch stopped ticking while he stood there, half muddied behind the hawthorn. When he checked it later at home, it had leapt ahead by an hour. Another evening, he felt sure only 10 minutes had passed, but his phone read 47. He didn't tell anyone, just kept watching. Somewhere in his 4th week, his dog followed him. A restless spaniel, too curious for his own good. Leo hadn't meant to bring him. But there he was, wriggling free of his collar as soon as they got close, darting up the slope. Archie, Leo hissed, running behind, heart jumping. The dog made straight for the center of the hill, straight for the tabby. Leo's breath caught. He sprinted, but Maribelle did not move. Not when Archie barked. Not when he dashed circles near her paws. not even when snow puffed beneath his leap. She only rose, just a few inches, and shifted. Not away. Forward. Toward the horizon. Toward the sun. She stood there, tail wrapped around her feet, anchoring her body precisely between the setting light and the dog's frantic energy. Archie stopped. Sat. Tilted his head with a whimper and went still. Leo stumbled up behind them, panting. He grabbed the leash, trembling, unsure why. Then he noticed the silence. The sun hung heavy over the far curve of trees, deep and low, like a thought ready to vanish. And in the middle of it all, Maribelle. She blinked. Once. And from where Leo stood, just 3 steps off, he swore he heard a sound. Not a meow, not a growl, but a low, rhythmic hum. Almost like purring. So soft he thought it might have been the wind, except that it wasn't. He held the leash tighter. Neither dog nor cat moved. The sky turned gold, then rose, then violet, and still they stayed, until the sun slipped beneath the hill with a sigh. Only then did Maribelle sit again. Only then did his dog rise, tail between legs, and walk slowly down. Leo didn't sleep well that night. He dreamed of the hill. Of eyes like candles and the hush before thunder. The next evening, he came early. This time, without hiding. He didn't get too close. 20 paces away, maybe, and sat down with his notebook closed for once. Maribelle arrived at her usual hour. Paused. Glanced in his direction, just briefly. Then turned west. Leo didn't say anything. Didn't move. Just stayed there, knees pulled to his chest, letting the silence hold him. And when the last light fled the field, and the edges grew cold and blue, he whispered, "I'm sorry." Maribelle didn't answer. But she didn't leave right away, either. Spring did not arrive all at once. It crept in slowly, through softened snowbanks at the edge of fences, through the first twitch of green underneath winter's sigh. One morning, crocuses bloomed unapologetically beside Clara's porch steps, though no one remembered planting them. The hill remained quiet, but the air around it changed. Mud replaced frost beneath careful paws. Wind carried longer notes, birdsong now, not just branches groaning. Somewhere in the trees near the bend, bees stirred too early, bumbling in the cold and bumping against unopened buds. Maribelle kept her vigil, still silent, still perfectly timed. Evening by evening, she made her way up the thawing slope, pausing now on dry stones instead of ice. The grass remained stubbled and brown, but softer now. And something in her walk had softened, too. Leo returned, most nights. He found a place a little closer, still keeping quiet. Sometimes he brought a folded blanket. Once, he brought a book, but he never read from it. It only rested on his knees while the sun dipped lower. One evening, there was a change. A bench. No one knew where it had come from. Simple, wooden, planked and slightly uneven, but sturdy. And placed in just the right spot, facing west, shaded by the bend of the tree, level with the top of the rise. Villagers asked, quietly, if anyone had made it. No one admitted to the work. No one saw it arrive. But it was there, and so it was used. By the 3rd day, Leo sat on it. So did an elderly couple no one had seen in months. So did a young mother, once, rocking a stroller with her shoe. They did not talk. They only watched. The hill grew stiller not because it was empty, but because those who came knew why they did. Sometimes, they brought with them names spoken only in thought. Memories led up the steps of the hill and settled into laps, not shared aloud but felt in the silence. Maribelle did not pay them any more mind than she had before. She sat. She watched. They followed her lead. Then came the jars. Glass ones, some clear, some green or blue, appearing at the base of the hill like stars dropped from a careful hand. They held candles. None were lit when placed. But some mornings, when villagers returned to walk the path, the wicks were melted. Glossy inside, as if burned through the night. No one saw who lit them. No one asked too loudly. By now, nearly everyone knew of the hill. Some only came once. Others returned weekly. Many brought quiet things, small notes folded between stones, pebbles from garden beds, or feathers tucked gently beneath roots. Children brought pressed flowers. They didn't explain these things. They didn't need to. Spring eased further in. Grass greened. Breezes grew softer, less lonely. And Maribelle, she remained. Every day, even if it rained, even if no one joined her, even if barking dogs passed down the nearby road. She came, and at sunset, the hill always filled with gold. Not loud gold, not bright. The quiet kind, the kind that slips under skin and stays there, reminding. Peace doesn't need to be announced. It only needs to be endured. To be returned to. As the sun began to make its long journey north, casting longer light across Clara's house and into the valley beyond, the hill took on a kind of glow just before dusk. Soft, steady, like gratitude. Sometimes a child would ask, "Do you think the cat's still watching for her?" And a parent would say, "Maybe." Then they'd press a hand gently to the child's back. And sit beside her to watch, too. The storm came in whispers first. A hush across the fields. Trees tightening inward. Animals gone eerily quiet. Then came the wind. A rush through rooftops, loud enough to startle shutters and rattle old glass. Rain followed sideways, insistent, sharp as fingers tapping too hard. They searched by morning. A puppy, barely a few months old, had gone missing overnight. Name was Wren, belonged to the midwife's niece from 3 streets over. New to walking, bold with the kind of bravery that doesn't yet know wind is something to be feared. At first, they thought she might have crawled under the porch or into one of the barns. But no paw prints, no scratches at the doors. By mid-morning, 3 people were calling her name. By noon, it was 10. The mud was thick, the rain unrelenting. Hope grew thinner with each hour. Then, just before dusk, a quiet knock came on the midwife's door. It was Leo, soaking, breathless. A hand clutched tightly around the leash, the other pointing toward the hill. "She's there," he whispered. At the top. No one waited to ask more. 4 adults and 1 boy climbed through rain-slick grass to the crest, shoes sliding, sleeves dripping. The air was cooler near the summit, as if the storm didn't dare rise that high. And there she was, Maribelle, curled beside the bench, her fur thickened by damp and shelter. At her side, nestled close, was Wren, dry. Tucked beneath the curve of the cat's flank like a boat against a harbor wall. They did not look up when the group approached. Maribelle didn't move. She faced west, eyes open, ears still. The puppy lifted her head, just once, as if to say, "We are fine. Don't rush." And beside them, an umbrella. Old, sun-bleached, wooden-handled, the kind no one uses anymore. Pitched perfectly above where they lay, jammed gently into the soft ground. Tilted against the wind, covering both of them. No one brought it. Wren was scooped up slowly, lovingly. But even then, Maribelle did not rise. She remained under the umbrella, watching the sky now blooming honey behind the mass of thinning clouds. "Thank you," the midwife whispered, not sure to whom. The next morning, the umbrella was gone. No trace it had ever been there. No hole where it pierced the ground. Just pressed grass, 2 sets of prints, 1 small, 1 smaller, and the paw-shaped flattening where Maribelle had lain. The puppy never strayed again. And when past the hill in spring, she always looked up. Not worried, just remembering. She came with a sketch pad, tucked under one arm like a secret she wasn't ready to tell. Travelers came through the village now and then, quiet types, often on the way to somewhere else. But this woman lingered, not long, not loudly. Just enough to be noticed without asking for attention. She arrived at the hill near sunset, boots crunching softly through the new spring grass. A scarf gathered the wind around her shoulders. She found a low spot near the bench, not too close, and sat cross-legged, pencil already in hand. She didn't speak. She didn't stare. She just looked. Then drew. Maribelle arrived a few minutes later, as regular as dusk. She sat in her spot, tail curled, gaze west, unmoved by the stranger down the slope. For the first few evenings, the woman only sketched. Nothing else. Just came, drew, and left without word. Some villagers guessed she was with a paper or magazine, others thought she might be lost. On the fourth evening, she visited the bakery and asked for string. She wrapped her drawings in it gently, as if tying a promise. Out of curiosity, the baker asked what she had drawn. She smiled, quiet as the hill's own hush, and said only, "The evening." A week passed before she showed her work to anyone. A child in the library asked what she was sketching, and the woman, without a word, knelt to show her the paper. The girl gasped. Not at the sunset, though the colors were stunning. Not at the wildflowers, which bent toward the wind with lifelike softness. Not even at the soft outline of light she'd given the clouds. It was the cat, Maribelle. There were 3 of her. One near the base of the hill. One sitting on the bench. One curled beneath the tree's shadow, eyes closed in a shape too gentle to be imagined. "But there's only one cat," said the girl. "I know," said the woman, puzzled. "I only drew what I saw." She searched her own paper, blinking as though surprised by her hand. "I swear," she said softly. "There was only one." Stories ripple quickly in quiet places. By the next evening, 4 villagers joined her near the hilltop, each sitting quietly, respectfully beside the bench, as Maribelle watched her sky. The woman drew again. This time, she opened her pad once she finished. Showed them what had come. Again, 3 cats. One standing. One reclining. One leaping almost invisibly through the strands of tall grass, no clearer than a fingerprint of shadow. She touched the page, confused. "I must be imagining them," she said. But no one argued. They just looked at the shapes. Then at Maribelle. Then at the sky. Another evening, the woman arrived before anyone else. Sat quietly with her paper. Her hands moved like water, slow, assured, without fear of mistakes. And this time, something changed. As the sun fell, she smiled, but not at her sketch. At the hill itself. "She moves," she whispered. "But not how you'd think." The next day, an entire fold-out display of sketches appeared in the village café. None had names. None had dates. Some called it art. Others called it something else. But after that, more people came to the hill, not to talk, not to ask, but to see what quiet shapes the light might paint in the grass, when no one was watching too hard. And always, somewhere, somehow, there was a shadow with softly curved ears, and eyes watching something only she understood. Time softened her. Maribelle moved now with careful grace, slower, her paws falling gently as though she weighed more than she used to, or perhaps understood the weight of each step a little more. Her fur, once sleek with youth, had taken on the texture of stories told again and again. But she still kept time. Still made her way to the hill each evening, no matter the wind, no matter the ache that sometimes made her pause mid-climb. The trail she followed was worn now, a faint curve of pressed grass leading up to her place. A ribbon of memory woven into the land. She paused more often now. Midway up the slope, beneath the elder tree where the light hung in slow-held breaths, she would sit. Gather strength. Let the air press into her. Then, always, she would rise and carry on, purpose in every small motion. The villagers noticed. They began to walk her path behind her. Not in front. And never too close. Some waited near the base, stepping aside when she passed. Others met her near the bench and sat down quietly, as though arriving for the same silent service. There was an understanding now. She belonged to no one. But to everyone, somehow, she meant home. One evening, Leo came with a blanket. Folded it carefully over the bench, smoothing the creases like he remembered Clara doing, even though he'd only seen it once. Maribelle didn't lie on it, she still preferred the earth, but she nested herself near its edge, curling close. On quiet days, villagers brought books. Not new ones. Books with soft covers and corners worn by years of hands. They opened them beside her and read aloud, not conversations, not to entertain. Just words in the air, shared like steam from a mug. Children's stories, weathered poems, recipes written in cursive. Once, someone read a letter they never sent. No one expected Maribelle to respond. But sometimes, she did. With a blink, a small change in her breathing. The twitch of a whisker. Or the way she leaned ever so slightly into the hand that hovered near, not quite petting, just offering. She never meowed. But once, on a particularly bright evening when the sun threw long shadows like spilled tea across the hill, a young girl giggled. Said she felt something rumble when her hand rested on the cat's side. A little engine, she whispered. Someone asked her what it powered. Remembering, she said. And somehow, everyone believed her. Maribelle's eyes clouded, just a little. Not dim, just distant. Like she could still see the horizon but also see through it, to everything that had come before. Her ears flattened less sharply now, even in wind. Her body no longer braced. It trusted the ground. And the ground, in turn, seemed to rise gently beneath her. Spring deepened into early summer. The trees thickened. Breezes wore warmth. The wildflowers near Clara's garden began appearing on the hill, though nobody planted them. Just pale purples, whites, and golds growing in the shape of paws. Still, Maribelle came. Still, she climbed. Still, she sat, even when her legs trembled. Even when her head dipped low before lifting again. Even when her breathing slowed to match the sky. She never missed a sunset. And though she lay longer now before rising once more, she always did. Until the light was gone. It happened on the quietest kind of evening. The kind where the sky forgets to shout its colors, and instead hums them gently across the fields. Warm, soft gold, not blazing. The kind you feel more than see. Maribelle walked slowly that day. Not limping exactly. Just, slower. Each step measured. Each breath carefully placed between motions, like porcelain tucked safe in a silk-lined drawer. She paused 3 times before the hill. Once beneath the ivy, where Clara's old garden gate still leaned. Once beside the path of pebbled stones, smoothed by seasons. Once just below the crest, where the grass grew soft and round as the edge of a page. She reached the bench. Didn't leap. She hadn't leapt in weeks. Just climbed, paw by paw, soft pads pressing into the wood like she knew it would hold for her. The people came quietly, as they always did. They had brought no stories that night. No books. No songs. Only candle jars, many of them, lit early so the wind would have to work to blow them out. Leo sat on the grass. The old woman with the steady hands came too, the one who used to read recipes aloud. The girl with the crayon drawing. The carpenter who never told anyone he had built the bench. They didn't speak to one another. But they felt each other, side by side. Maribelle sat. Not curled this time, just upright. Still. Her tail wrapped slow around her front paws, now a little too thin, a little too fragile in the light. The sun began its descent, not fast, not fiery. just lazily falling between the folds of distant hills, a final breath exhaled in tones of apricot and soft weather. Maribelle didn't blink for a long time. Then, just near the horizon's edge, she shifted. Not much. Not dramatically. She lifted her chin. The breeze came warm across the hilltop. Strangely so, as if the wind itself bowed for her. And only then did she lie down. Not coiled, not stretched. Just rested, head nestled gently into the crook of one paw, the other tucked close beside her chest. Her breathing was even, slow. A child whispered, "She's dreaming." But Maribelle's eyes remained open. Just barely, watching, until they weren't. No sound left her, no cry. She simply stopped moving. No tension in the shoulders. No spasm or darting flicker of tail. Only a long, slow exhale. Then stillness. And the sun, just as it tipped beyond the final rim of Earth, sent one last curve of light. It caught her fur, lit it gold. Then it, too, was gone. The village didn't stir, not for a long time. When they did, it was not as mourners, but as witnesses. They left candles in circles. Not arranged, just gently set down. They wrote nothing. They didn't need to. After everyone departed, the hill seemed to breathe. Not loudly. No rattling wind or rustle. Just a low hum, like the sound a garden makes at dusk, when no one is speaking but everything is alive. A breeze passed through, soft, carrying the scent of lilac. Which was strange, because the lilacs hadn't bloomed yet. But nobody questioned it, and by morning, on the bench where a tabby had sat through more sunsets than any clock could name, there lay a single sunrise-colored petal. It didn't belong to any flower nearby. But somehow, it felt familiar. Spring returned like a memory half-remembered. Not all at once, but gradually, like waking from a long, quiet dream. The sky thinned into blue, soft with tentative light. Grass climbed its way through thawing soil. Birdsong stitched morning into the air. And the hill remained, untouched, yet not unchanged. The villagers came quietly, the way people visit graves with stones in their pockets and stories folded inside. They did not speak at first. Just stood at the base, looking upward. They noticed it before they reached the top. A patch of yellow. Not weeds, not dandelions. Daffodils. A small, clustered bloom, right where Maribelle used to sit. Bright as butter, soft as sunlit ribbon. Dozens of them, though no one could remember planting a thing. Someone knelt, reached gently toward the petals. No bulbs, they whispered. No stems showing, but they held fast to the earth as though grown there for years. A sign appeared weeks later. Fixed into the earth with care, but no name. No nails, no hammer heard. Just, there one morning. Carved wood, smooth with time, sealed against weather. Its letters simple, nothing ornate. Claris light, no one made a fuss. They read it the way one reads a letter long expected. No surprise, only warmth. The bench remained dry that spring, as though rain never touched it. Children returned to walk the slope again. Some brought chalk, others brought stories. More than a few brought a kind of quiet they hadn't had before. And once, only once, someone saw something on the hill just after twilight. A kitten, small, tabby-striped, sitting alone just beside the daffodils. Facing west. It didn't stay long. Glanced once toward the bench, blinked slowly, and disappeared into the tall grass, as if folded there by the wind. The villagers said nothing, only smiled. Another came weeks later. This one with white feet and a crook in its tail. It settled under the tree's edge while the sun lowered its head across the fields. No one approached. No one needed to. Sometimes a single candle jar would relight itself. Other times, a trail of pebbles would appear, leading from Clara's porch to the edge of the hill. Patterns different each time, never the same size. No one cleaned them away. And no one questioned when the grass stretched long and wild again that summer. As if left undisturbed on purpose. A soft wilderness cradling memory. Those who visited didn't always come with grief. Some just came to sit. Breathe. Be. It wasn't about Maribelle anymore. Or Clara. It wasn't about the story, or the sunset, or even the sky. It was about what settled in the spaces they left behind. What still waits there, warm, still, and quietly alive. Years passed, as they do. Some quickly, like wind chasing leaves. Others slowly, like the turning of an old page with fingers that hesitate before letting go. Leo grew, quietly, into his own skin, into his own voice. Taller now. His hair darkened, his frame lengthened, and the wild impatience of boyhood softened into a kind of gentle knowing. But he did not forget. Not Maribelle. Not the hill. Not the hush of those evenings where silences spoke more than words. And somewhere in the rhythm of days and years and seasons repeating themselves like lullabies, Leo began to write. He didn't mean to, at first. Just notes. Thoughts. Sketches made from memory. A line here. A feeling there. Sometimes a scene half remembered, not for accuracy, but for the way it made his chest ache gently without hurting. Then one evening, as dusk found its gold again, he sat beneath Clara's hill and whispered, "I think I'm ready." The book arrived like a sunrise, quiet at first, then warming everything around it. The Cat Who Watched the Sun Fall. A children's book by name, though many said it wasn't just for children. Bound in deep blue cloth, illustrated with care, its pages carried the story like one carries something precious between thumb and palm. There were no photographs, no dedications, only the tale of a cat with soft feet and golden eyes who never missed a sunset. A quiet hill, a window filled with lavender light, a woman who loved without needing to be loved back aloud. The story did not claim to be true, but truth lived in its margins. Schools read it at storytime. Libraries kept extra copies for where the pages grew worn from being opened and reopened again. Sleepy grandparents folded it into bedtime rituals like an old hymn learned younger than memory. And yes, children everywhere said the same thing. "I know that cat." Some whispered it. Others declared it, pointing to illustrations where the silhouette curled beside a bench, or dozed under flowers, or stood impossibly still as the sky poured honey and flame. "I've seen her," they'd say. "She was in my yard once." Or, "She watched the sunset with me." One child told his grandfather, "She visits me when I feel lonely," and the old man only nodded, and squeezed the boy's hand a little tighter without saying why it meant so much. People began to leave copies of the book at Clara's hill. Tucked beneath the bench, nestled on the grass. Some left bookmarks made of ribbon. Some pressed leaves inside, not as offerings exactly, more like conversation. Leo never explained a word of the book. Not in interviews, not at readings, not when someone asked, point blank, if the story was real. He only smiled, the kind of smile that keeps more than it gives. Those who asked got the same answer every time. "I just wrote what I remembered." Which, sometimes, said more than truth ever could. And the hill? It stayed. Stories may stretch or soften or shift. But some places keep them exactly as they were first told. Even now, if you walk the slope at dusk, you might find a page from a worn-out copy fluttering just beneath the bench. No name. Just one sentence, curled into the breeze like a prayer. She was never looking at the sunset. She was looking for someone who used to. The girl came with a blanket folded in her arms and an old book clasped to her chest, both held with the care usually reserved for secrets. It was early April, warm enough to melt the last of winter from the tree limbs, but still cool in the shadows. Birds faltered mid-song, as if relearning their own melodies. She climbed the hill alone. Not hurried, each footstep considered, as if she didn't want to change the shape of the path too much. Her shoes were scuffed. Her braid was loose. She didn't look back. At the top, the bench waited. No one else was there. She unfolded the blanket across the worn wood, smoothing it with hands small but practiced. Then sat, cross-legged, the book resting in her lap. Crayons had given it color. A cover drawn with swirls of orange and violet, a shape that might have been a cat curled into the edge of a rising sun. She didn't open it at first. Just sat, looked out, let the wind pass through her braid and around her shoulders. The sun had only just begun to lower, still broad and bright, not yet red at the edges. The sky held its breath. She opened the book, turned carefully to one of the middle pages. Not to read, just to see. It was a drawing, childlike but deliberate. A bench, flowers, a hill, 2 figures. The smaller one was a cat. The larger looked something like her. She smiled at it, a small, knowing smile that settled into the corners of her cheeks like light pooling into hollows. "It's a good one today," she whispered. And then, quietly, "You can sit if you want." Moments passed. Birds called somewhere beyond the valley. Then, a rustle. A tabby kitten appeared from the tall grass. Nearly silent, small as a sigh, ears flicked forward, eyes wide with the curiosity of those who remember only what matters. It approached slowly, not hesitant, not afraid, just unhurried. It stepped up to the bench, looked once at the girl, then leapt softly beside her. Settled, their shoulders touched. Neither spoke. Then, with a kind of reverence only children and animals truly understand, the girl shifted the book onto her knees, so that the kitten could see too. "See," she whispered, "that's the bench." The cat blinked once, tail curled neatly against the edge of the blanket. The sun, lower now, softened the world around them, turned the grasses amber, lit their faces with a halo of almost. And together, they read, not aloud, not page for page, but in the way shared moments are read. With silence, with stillness, with eyes that do not move from each other, or the sky behind. The light deepened, a breeze turned the page. Neither of them reached to stop it. They still walk there, older now, some of them. Faces lined with other losses, other years, but their steps somehow lighter when they take the path to the hill. They don't announce they're going. They just feel when it's time. Some bring nothing. Others bring items too small to explain. A button from a sewing tin, a ribbon once tied to a braid, a stone from a favorite river. Objects that wouldn't mean much anywhere else. But here, they settle into the grass like notes in a familiar song. The bench remains, worn smoother now, light and soft at its legs, but unchanged. It catches the light with grace, holds the weight of memory in a way no carving could. Sometimes, people come and say nothing at all. They don't need to. Others speak softly, not into the air, but toward a presence they may not see. Telling the hill what they never got to say. Mistakes they made, names they dared not forget. Apologies carried longer than regrets. And the hill listens. No echo, no wind responding, just silence in the shape of understanding. Children come, too, fewer than before, but still enough. They run up the slope, laughing without reason, and then, for reasons they can't name, grow quiet at the top. "They always get soft there," one mother said. Like something told them to be gentle. No one questions it. And then, now and then, only sometimes, there's a cat. Never with warning. Never the same one. A shape by the stump. A flicker beneath the tall grass near the edge. Ears turning at nothing in particular. Eyes that seem too deep to belong to a kitten. Once, a teenage boy claimed he saw it walking the ridge as a storm rolled in. just walking, as though out for air. In no hurry. It didn't wait, didn't pause when he called. It simply vanished down the knoll without sound, rejoining the dusk as if stitched into it. He didn't tell anyone for weeks. Not because he didn't believe, but because he didn't quite know how to explain the way he suddenly felt calmer whenever the sky turned rose and indigo. Some say it's the wind they see. Tricks of light, shadows shaped by memory. Others say nothing, because honestly, what need is there for proof? Not when the air knows when to still. Not when the flowers bloom in the same place each year, even though their seeds were never sown. Not when people walk away from the hill slower than they arrived. Something waits there, not loudly, not to be found or named, but to be felt, in your breath, in your chest, in the way the grass knows when to lean without falling, and in the hush that reminds you, some kinds of love do not leave. They learn to rest in the wind. You can still see it. The hill, just beyond the last house on the lane, where the earth tips slightly west, like it wants to watch too. It catches more light than anywhere else. The sun always lingers there, just a little longer, as if reluctant to say goodbye. Villagers call it the place where sunsets go to sleep. There's no sign to say that. No poem carved into the bench. Yet everyone knows. Children climb it now, same as they've always done, their footsteps lighter but somehow familiar. A few run ahead, most walk slowly near the top. And when they reach it, they stop, even the squirming ones. The chatter quiets. Something about the sky silences them. Not with awe, with welcome. Some bring animals. A dog here, a rabbit once. A parrot that sat on its owner's shoulder and gazed out like it, too, was remembering something. Even pets seem different at the hill, calmer, more curious. More still. Maribelle is not always seen. But sometimes, in that last slant of sun, light shapes itself in ways that catch the corner of the eye. A shimmer just above the grass. A curve near the patch of daffodils. A shape that looks familiar. Like a tail curling, or the arch of a back just before stretching. Most shrug it off. Light does strange things when it wants to. Some say it's wind. Others claim it's the earth remembering. Some have theories. Others say nothing at all. But once in a while, someone walking down the hill right after sunset, someone holding a child's hand, perhaps, are carrying a folded note in their coat pocket, will turn back. Not because they hear something. Not because they're unsure. But because they feel it. That the light behind them has paused, just for a second longer than it should have. And when they look, they might see it. A bend in gold. A flicker in lavender. A silhouette that doesn't stay. Gone before the eye truly catches up. Before the heart can name it. But enough. Enough to feel it in the chest. Enough to make someone smile, tearlessly. Because they'll understand. The sun wasn't going. It was waving. And that soft outline was no trick. It was a cat. Not just any cat. But the memory of one who never missed a sunset. And still waits for no reason but love. They say animals don't keep time the way we do. They don't mark calendars. Don't count years. Don't name anniversaries or carry clocks in their pockets. But then how did she always know? How did she never miss a day? Not once. Not in wind or storm or frost so thick it turned the breath white and brittle. Not in change or silence or the long stretch of years that passed like soft footfalls on polished floors. Maribelle, the cat who watched the sun fall. Every evening. Same hill. Same gaze. She wasn't waiting for something. Not really. She was keeping something. A rhythm. Not the kind that ticks and talks. The kind you feel when you stir tea in silence. The kind that lives in the pause between someone's words and their smile. The kind that says, I'm still here. People came and went. Some grew taller. Others older. Some not at all. The hill changed, then didn't. Grass grew. Flowers came and forgot to leave. Stones shifted and found purpose again. But the light remembered her. Always bending a little longer, a little lower, as if reluctant to go. And maybe that's what love is. Not just what we give while someone is with us, but what we continue offering in their shape, their memory, their rhythm. She sat every evening because that's what mattered. Because someone once said thank you at the same time to the same sun, and she remembered the shape of that moment. And decided to keep it. All this time. And who does that? Except someone who knows that love waits. Not loudly, not with banners or clocks. But quietly. The way a window remembers the angle of light. The way a bench holds the echo of laughter long gone. The way the sky turns soft when no one asks it to. She watched the sunset every single day. Not because she was waiting for someone to return. But because someone had once been there to see it. And it was her way of saying, still. Still watching. Still here. Still yours.